The entire room went silent when a black luxury car rolled slowly down a narrow street and stopped in front of the tiny tailoring shop. It didn't belong there. The houses were old. The sidewalks cracked. The neighborhood was used to delivery vans and secondhand sedans, not a shining chauffeur-driven car that looked like it came straight from a billionaire's garage. Curtains shifted. Neighbors peeked through windows. Inside the shop, however, life continued as usual. 62-year-old Miss Eleanor sat hunched gently over her sewing machine, carefully stitching the hem of a little boy's school uniform. The soft humming of the machine filled the small room. The paint on the walls was peeling. A ceiling fan rotated slowly with a tired creak. Thread spools of different colors lined a dusty shelf. Above the door hung a faded wooden sign. Eleanor's alterations, repairs with care. She believed in those words. The bell above the door suddenly jingled. Eleanor looked up. The man who stepped inside seemed completely out of place. Tall, confident, impeccably dressed, except for one glaring problem. The shoulder of his suit was badly torn. Not a small rip. A deep, ugly tear in fabric that clearly wasn't ordinary cloth. He looked irritated, but more than that, embarrassed. "I need this fixed. Today," he said, his voice firm but controlled. Eleanor stood slowly and adjusted her glasses. She ran her experienced fingers gently over the fabric. Her eyes widened slightly. This wasn't department store material. This was custom work. Fine stitching. Imported wool. Hand-finished lining. Very expensive. "Sir," she said carefully, "this isn't an easy repair. The fabric is delicate, but I can try." He exhaled sharply and glanced at his watch, a watch that probably cost more than her yearly rent. "I have a major charity gala tonight. Cameras. Investors. I can't walk in looking like this." There was pressure in his voice. Stress. Urgency. Eleanor nodded calmly. "Leave it with me." For the next 3 hours, she worked with total focus. She removed damaged stitching thread by thread, matched the color perfectly, reinforced the inner lining. Her hands moved steadily, like they had done thousands of times before. Outside, the black car waited. Inside, something simple but powerful was happening, craftsmanship mixed with care. Finally, she pressed the suit one last time and held it up. Perfect. When a man returned and put it on, he turned slowly toward the mirror. He touched the repaired shoulder. There was no visible damage. It looked brand new. His expression changed. The frustration was gone, replaced with quiet relief. "How much?" he asked, reaching for his wallet. Eleanor paused. She looked at him, not at his watch, not at his polished shoes, but at his tired eyes. "You looked worried when you came in," she said gently. "It's no charge." He froze. "No charge." She smiled softly. "Just pay it forward one day." That's enough. For a moment, he didn't speak. People usually treated him differently. Charged extra. Tried to impress him. But she didn't even ask his name. "Kindness," she added quietly, "doesn't send invoices." The man studied her face carefully, as if trying to understand something deeper. Then he nodded once. "Thank you," he said, and this time it sounded genuine. He walked out. The black car drove away. The street slowly returned to normal. Eleanor went back to her sewing machine. She never asked who he was. She had no idea. She had just helped one of the richest men in the country. The man was Marcus Whitmore, a name that dominated business headlines. Tech billionaire, visionary investor, owner of companies that shaped industries. A man whose decisions could move markets overnight. But that evening, standing beneath crystal chandeliers at one of the most exclusive charity galas in the city, Marcus Whitmore wasn't thinking about profits, partnerships, or press coverage. Cameras flashed as he stepped onto the stage. Applause filled the ballroom. Wealthy donors and celebrities leaned forward to hear him speak. He delivered his speech perfectly, confident, polished, commanding. Yet behind his calm expression, his thoughts were somewhere else. Not in the ballroom, not in the spotlight, but in a small shop with peeling paint and a tired ceiling fan. He remembered the way the elderly woman's hands moved carefully over the torn fabric. The patience in her voice, the kindness in her eyes. Most people changed the moment they realized who he was. Some became overly polite. Others tried to impress him. Many tried to profit from him. But she didn't ask his name. She didn't recognize his face. She didn't even charge him. Just pay it forward, she had said. The words echoed in his mind long after the applause faded. That night, as he removed the perfectly repaired suit jacket and hung it carefully in his closet, he made a decision. The next morning, before his first meeting, Marcus called his legal team. His assistant patched the call through immediately. "I wanted to find a shop called Eleanor's Alterations," Marcus said calmly. There was a brief pause on the line as keyboards began typing. "Yes, sir," one of the senior lawyers responded. "And prepare the documents." "Documents for what, sir?" another lawyer asked cautiously. Marcus looked out of his office window at the skyline below. "You'll see." Across town, Eleanor's morning looked very different. Sunlight filtered softly through the dusty front window of her shop. She was already at her sewing machine, mending a winter coat that had seen better days. The shop was quiet. Too quiet. Business had slowed over the past year. Large retail chains had taken many customers. Online services were cheaper. On the corner of her work table sat 2 unopened envelopes. Final notices. Her rent was overdue, 3 months behind. The landlord had been patient at first, but patience has limits. Eleanor tried not to think about it. Instead, she hummed an old gospel hymn under her breath as she stitched, her voice soft but steady. Singing helped her focus. It helped her believe things would somehow work out. She had faced hard times before. She would face this too. Outside, the street carried its usual rhythm. Children walking to school, neighbors sweeping sidewalks, distant traffic humming. Then the sound came. Low, smooth, powerful. One black car turned onto the street. Then another. Then a third. They moved slowly, deliberately, like they owned the road. Neighbors stopped mid-conversation. Curtains shifted again. People stepped onto porches. The cars parked directly in front of Eleanor's shop. Engines turned off. Doors opened in perfect sequence. Men in dark suits stepped out, their expressions serious, their movements precise. The entire neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. Inside the shop, Eleanor didn't notice at first. She was threading a needle when the bell above the door rang. Once. Clear. Sharp. She looked up, and her heart skipped. The men in suits were walking in. Eleanor's heart started racing the moment the men stepped fully inside her shop. The cheerful jingle of the doorbell now felt sharp, almost alarming. 3 men, all in dark suits, crisp white shirts, polished shoes, each carrying a leather briefcase. Lawyers. You could tell just by the way they stood, straight backs, serious faces, eyes scanning the room like they were measuring it. The air inside the tiny shop suddenly felt too heavy to breathe. "Ma'am," the tallest one began politely. "Are you Miss Eleanor Johnson?" Her fingers tightened around the edge of her sewing table. "Yes," she answered softly. Her voice didn't sound like her own. "May we speak with you?" Her mind began racing faster than her heart. Did she damage that expensive suit without realizing it? Was there a hidden tear she hadn't noticed? Was she being sued? She had no savings for court, no money for a lawyer. Was this how it ended? Her small shop, her livelihood, gone. 2 customers who had been browsing fabric exchanged nervous glances and quietly slipped out the door. Even the neighborhood noise outside seemed to fade. One of the lawyers stepped forward and placed a thick, neatly organized folder on her work table, right beside her sewing machine. The sound of it landing felt final. Eleanor swallowed hard. "I'm sorry if something went wrong," she rushed to say, her voice trembling now. "I did my best on the repair. I've been sewing for over 40 years. I would never intentionally." The lawyer gently raised his hand, stopping her. "Miss Johnson, please." His tone softened. "Mr. Marcus Whitmore asked us to deliver something to you." The name hit her like a sudden gust of wind. Marcus Whitmore? Her eyes widened behind her glasses. She had seen him on television, on magazine covers at the grocery store checkout. Tech billionaire, philanthropist, one of the richest men in the country. Her knees felt weak, and she gripped the table for balance. That was him," she whispered, almost to herself. The lawyer gave a small nod. "Yes, ma'am." The room felt very small now, very quiet. The lead lawyer carefully opened the folder and turned it toward her. Pages of official documents, stamps, signatures, legal seals. These documents, he said clearly, legally transfer ownership of this building to you. She blinked. Once. Twice. Her brain refused to process the words. I don't understand, she murmured. Another lawyer, slightly younger, allowed himself a faint smile. The building was purchased this morning under Mr. Whitmore's authorization. Paid in full. All outstanding balances cleared. Eleanor stared at them. No rent. The first lawyer continued calmly. No debt. No landlord. He gently tapped the final page. It is now yours, Miss Johnson. Silence. Complete silence. Even the ticking of the old wall clock sounded louder. Eleanor looked around her shop. The cracked ceiling, the worn wooden floor, the sewing machine she had owned for decades. Yours. The word echoed in her mind. Her hands slowly lifted from the table, trembling. This must be some mistake, she whispered again, though her voice carried less fear now and more disbelief. It is not a mistake, the lawyer assured her. Outside, neighbors had gathered near the window, trying to peek inside. Inside, Eleanor stood frozen between fear and something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Tears slowly filled Eleanor's eyes, blurring the legal documents in front of her. This must be a mistake, she whispered again, her voice fragile, almost childlike. The lead lawyer shook his head gently. It is not, he said softly. Mr. Whitmore asked us to personally tell you something. She looked up, her vision trembling behind watery glasses. He said, you repaired more than a suit that day. The lawyer paused, choosing his words carefully. You restored his faith. The sentence hung in the air. Eleanor instinctively covered her mouth with her hand as emotion rushed through her chest. No one had ever described her work that way before. To her, it was just sewing, just helping. But to someone else, it had meant something deeper. She tried to steady her breathing, but her heart felt too full. Just when she thought the surprise was over, the lawyer continued. There is also a renovation fund established in your name, he explained, sliding another document forward. It will cover structural repairs, new equipment, updated interiors, whatever you feel this shop needs. Eleanor stared at him in disbelief. And that's not all, he added gently. Mr. Whitmore has also created a scholarship program for aspiring young designers in this community. Students who cannot afford fashion school or training. Her eyebrows lifted slowly. You would oversee the program, the younger lawyer said with a warm smile. You would choose the students, mentor them, guide them. Eleanor could no longer hold back the tears. They streamed freely down her cheeks now. All her life, she had worked quietly in this small shop. She had mended prom dresses for girls who couldn't afford new ones. She had stitched winter coats for children whose parents apologized for not being able to pay on time. She had given discounts to single mothers, repaired church robes for free, hemmed uniforms late into the night without complaining. She had never done it for recognition, never expected applause, and certainly never imagined this. Outside, neighbors pressed closer to the windows, whispering in confusion and curiosity. Word was spreading fast. Inside, Eleanor slowly lowered herself into the old wooden chair behind her sewing table, the same chair she had sat in for decades. Her hands rested in her lap, shaking slightly. Why? She asked softly, almost to herself. The room felt still again. The lead lawyer reached into his briefcase and removed a single folded envelope. This, he said kindly, is from Mr. Whitmore. He handed it to her with care. Eleanor opened it carefully, as though it might disappear if she moved too quickly. Inside was a handwritten note. Not typed, not printed, handwritten. Her eyes moved slowly across the words. Asterisk. You reminded me that character matters more than wealth. You gave without knowing who I was. This is simply me paying it forward. Marcus. Asterisk. Her lips trembled as she read it again. And again. She pressed the note gently against her chest, closing her eyes for a moment. For years, she had felt invisible. Just another small shop on a forgotten street. But in that moment, for the first time in a very long time, Eleanor Johnson felt seen. Within weeks, Eleanor's shop transformed in ways the neighborhood had never imagined. The cracked exterior walls were repainted in warm cream and soft gold. The old wooden sign was carefully restored, polished until the words shined proudly again. Eleanor's alterations, repairs with care. Inside, the changes were even more remarkable. Bright new lights replaced the dim yellow bulbs. Modern sewing machines stood beside her original one, which she refused to move. "That one built this shop," she would say with a gentle smile. Fresh fabric rolls lined the walls in vibrant colors. Organized shelves replaced dusty corners. The floorboards were repaired, sanded smooth, and varnished until they gleamed. But the most beautiful change wasn't the paint. It was the people. Young apprentices from a neighborhood now filled the shop each afternoon. Teenagers who once wandered the streets uncertain about their future were now learning how to measure, stitch, design, and create. Some came from families who couldn't afford college. Some had talent, but no opportunity. Now they had both. And at the center of it all stood Eleanor, still wearing her simple glasses, still humming softly while she worked, still correcting stitches gently instead of criticizing. She didn't change her voice. She didn't change her attitude. She didn't suddenly act important. She remained humble, kind, soft-spoken. When local reporters arrived to cover the story, cameras and microphones filling the once quiet shop, Eleanor stood calmly in front of them. "Miss Johnson, how does it feel to have your life changed overnight?" one reporter asked excitedly. She adjusted her glasses and smiled modestly. "I just fixed a suit," she replied. "That's all." The reporters laughed softly, but the community knew better. It was never just about the suit. It was about integrity, about doing the right thing when no one is watching, about kindness given freely, without calculating what might come back in return. Parents began bringing their children not just for alterations, but to meet her. Church leaders mentioned her story in sermons. Teachers shared it in classrooms, because Eleanor had reminded everyone of something powerful. Generosity doesn't require wealth. Character doesn't require recognition. And sometimes the smallest, quietest acts create the biggest waves. On the day of the grand reopening, a modest ribbon was stretched across the entrance of the renewed shop. Neighbors gathered. Apprentices stood proudly in clothes they had stitched themselves. Cameras flashed. But near the back of the crowd, standing quietly with his hands folded, was a familiar figure. Marcus Whitmore. No press announcement. No formal speech. No spotlight. He didn't step forward when Eleanor cut the ribbon. He didn't try to take credit. He simply watched. There was a brief moment when their eyes met across the room. No words were needed, just a small nod of mutual respect. Two people from very different worlds, connected by one simple decision: to be kind. And as laughter filled the shop and sewing machines hummed once again, one truth became clear. Kindness multiplies. It travels further than money. It builds stronger than power. And sometimes, when you give freely, without expecting anything in return, life finds a way to surprise you. Sometimes, it sends lawyers to your door.